So at 4 o'clock, it is now 4 o'clock. DNA, we strive to do things on time. So, Mr. Chaplain, would you like to lead us in prayer?
Yes, sir. We'll be all bow for a moment, please. God, our Redeemer, we are grateful for life, health, strength, and safety today. Today, we ask for your guidance, your wisdom, your support as we conduct this town hall meeting. We ask that you would help us to engage in meaningful discussions and allow us to grow closer as a group and a society, and help us to nurture the bonds of community. God, we ask for your grace and remind us that everything we seek to do and accomplish is for the pursuit of truth, justice, and in service of our community and humanity. We ask and receive all these blessings and favors. And every heart says, amen.
Amen. Amen. First of all, we'd like to start with the Pledge of Allegiance, please, by the Savion Battle.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Savion. Hello, Savion, are you there?
I'm so sorry, I thought I was unmuted.
Yes, can you start with the Pledge of Allegiance, please, when you're ready? Thank you.
Yes. I pledge my allegiance to the flag and to the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, for which it stands, one people united in love and service.
Thank you very much, Savion. Before we move on today, I'd just like to welcome all of you to our series of town hall meetings. This is one in the series, and we have not let COVID-19 stop us. Our very special topic for today is Beyond COVID-19, a New Direction. And so, without further ado, I'd like to recognize the leader of our organization, Mrs. Orinthia S. Komalafe, and our deputy leader, Mr. Bushimi Mbrista. I'd also like to recognize our speakers, Mr. Darren Cooper, a businessman out of Grand Bahama. Also, Mr. Prescott Smith, who is an avid environmentalist and freedom fighter, and he's the president of BFFI and BSCA, and he's here to speak on natural resources. Also, our other speaker is Mr. Lester R. Cox, who is a known personality, a business coach, and he's here to speak on autonomous cities, which is our third great evolution. Also, I'd like to recognize our youth leaders, Ms. Shakira Lightbourne, who's president of YDA. She'll be speaking on COVID-19, the youth perspective. And also Ms. Kelly Roll, our vice chair of youth affairs, who will be speaking on igniting our youth. Our other speaker will also be Mr. Derek Smith, who will be speaking on agriculture and food security. And as mentioned before, our deputy leader, he'll be speaking on transportation in this new environment. Well, good evening, everyone, again, and welcome to our town hall meeting. My fellow Bahamians and those who are listening worldwide, it is a great pleasure that I invite you to our nationwide virtual town hall meeting. In this forum, we'll be engaging the citizens of our country in a digital space that accommodates all citizens in this country, from Inagua in the south to Bimini in the north. We welcome you all. The purpose of this event is to inform, engage, and inspire our nation so that what we would all agree is a crisis of epic proportions can and must serve as the greatest opportunity in a generation to undergo a total reset and revamping of our nation. For many years now, we have identified these fundamental and systemic problems facing our nation, but have never had the right motivation and sense of urgency and clarity regarding these failures to make those bold changes a reality. I think the vast majority of us are now ready for change. These failures in our countries have continuously disadvantaged the vast majority while benefiting the much smaller and privileged few. It is as clear as our pristine Bahamian waters that where we are as a country is absolutely unacceptable. It is equally as clear that those entrusted with the responsibility, past and present, have not delivered good governance on behalf of the Bahamian people. This we cannot deny. The most important concern of our people is Bahamian economic empowerment. Specifically, that in a country such as ours, that produces and possesses such immense wealth, that wealth is made available for the Bahamian masses to benefit and enjoy. As it stands now, most of us are on the outside looking in, unwelcomed, and locked out from our very own table. Can you imagine that? This evening, we'll be focusing on those most pressing challenges we face, the DNA's position and prospective solutions to those challenges, so that now that we have the will and the desire, we can make those changes that we want and need. From its inception, the DNA has put forth directives in our vision for the nation to address many of these vexing issues. Our platform calls for us to undergo a comprehensive national diagnostic to identify our natural resources, how best to exploit them, and their comparative advantages. Enact legislation that prohibits any company with less than 60% Bahamian ownership to export or mine any product classified as a natural resource. To establish a Ministry of Environment and Natural Resource that will manage our natural resources in transparency and openness, not secrecy where we have to find out sip what's going on in our country. To transfer all taxes or profits from products classified as a natural resource into a sovereign wealth fund. Responsibly grant licenses for the exploration, studies, and development of natural resources in the Bahamas, and to bring a realistic approach to finally addressing the financial compliance issues that have been plaguing our country. And this is where one that is really coming to fore right now in terms of compliance. And in financial service and in our financial services, we want to increase the pool of personally certified persons in all those sectors by 30% within 5 years. We want to work towards relaxing and liberalizing the process of exchange controls within 5 years. We also want to review and thoroughly review the value-added tax or VAT in an effort to reduce its impact on the cost of living in the Bahamas. We want to implement performance-based budgeting practices which would cut funding to underperforming, wasteful, and unnecessary projects as part of efforts to right-size the government's portfolio. These issues that previous governments have used as political ploys to keep their supporters employed. We want to implement a flat tax business license scheme, undertake an audit of the national debt, introduce a national lottery to use some of those revenue to finance new education, healthcare, sports, and cultural initiatives. In the area of investments, we want to have a process more transparent through the use of online platforms, additional checks and balances overseen by an investment advisor assigned by the Bahamas Investment Authority. A DNA government will give priority to automation and digitization of Bahamian services to encourage and attract and retain local, more importantly, and foreign direct investment. We will have a transparent investment policy that will be codified in law and will provide more certainty to investors and what they're able to invest in. This would also increase confidence in government and minimize and eliminate the incidents of underhanded deals and all forms of corruption that we suffer from over the decades in this country. In small and medium-sized enterprises, the DNA government, in recognizing the importance of small and medium-sized enterprises, we will increase and emphasize the overall support of SMEs with targeted focus in specific industries that expand entrepreneurial and job opportunities and add value to the value of increasing our GDP, our gross domestic product. In trade, we will review all trade agreements that the Bahamas is currently engaged in and amend those terms where necessary. We will upgrade the standards and quality of the Bahamas' systems to facilitate trade between our country and our partners, whether regional or international. We will implement better regulations on capital flows to prepare the Bahamas for increased international trade and cooperation. We will not sign any agreement, formally or in principle, without the express consent of the Bahamian people by virtue of polling data or a referendum. And in this, I would say the DNA has said no to the WTO. And in this current environment, we can see how that would have been important. In tourism, a DNA government will expand initiatives and tax breaks to Bahamian enterprises in the Family Islands that would open boutique hotels. We want to make Crown land available for Bahamians wishing to open up boutique hotels on Family Islands. Invest in cultural tourism in a meaningful way and set aside additional funding for marketing and promotion of our cultural tourism brand. We'll increase marketing expenditure that would be targeted for the promotion of our Junkanoo Parade celebrations. These are many, but not all of the initiatives in our Bahamian-centric economic platform. When you analyze these initiatives, and there's going to be more coming this evening in our speakers, you will see there's a reoccurring theme, which is Bahamians having access to capital, access to economic opportunity, and the economic wealth of our country. In short, our mission is to get our country and its economy into the possession of Bahamians. With that being said, we must appreciate that this is a new environment. Things must be done differently. The Bahamas and the world has been given a wake-up call. This is a perfect time to set a new national mindset toward one that will take us as a people not only to survive, but to thrive. Know that this is a time to reinvent our attitudes toward entrepreneurship, toward learning new skills, and be willing and ready to adapt. It is those people, those families, those businesses, those institutions and countries that embrace these changes that will be successful in this new world. While we in the DNA are committed to Bahamian empowerment, let us make it clear. We welcome the world to enjoy our blessings. As Bahamians, we have always been welcoming and hospitable, and this will continue and it must continue. However, as indicated in the preamble of our Constitution, we are the inheritors of these islands, rocks, and keys. And as such, it is only fair that we should be the major benefactors and custodians of them, and not disadvantaged in our own homeland. In closing, I have faith in our people. I have faith in this generation of Bahamians to answer the call, to stand in the gap, and be the catalyst, to be the change agents that bring true independence through Bahamian ownership of economy and by extension, our country. Thank you, everyone. Please enjoy your engagement with us this evening at our virtual town hall meeting. Thank you very much. And with that, I would like to introduce our first speaker. Additionally, I want to inform you that the format for today, for those who just came on, we will listen to all of the presenters, and at the end of the last presentation, we will take questions from the Zoom app, also from Facebook. You can type them in. If you're on Zoom and you don't want to speak, you can just type it in and we'll get your question and we'll answer it. And you direct it to whatever presenter you want to answer the question. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our YDA president, Ms. Shakira Lightbourne. Welcome, Ms. Lightbourne. Ms. Lightbourne, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Go ahead.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, my fellow panelists, young Bahamians throughout our archipelago, DNA leaders, executives, and officers, and those joining us via via Zoom and Facebook Live. I am Shakira Lightbourne, president of the Young Democrats Alliance, and I am an agent of change advocating for a new Bahamas. With the sudden implications of COVID-19 pandemic, many young people, both locally and globally, are struggling to return to normalcy in their lives. The reality of this global health crisis has negatively impacted a vast majority of youths across the globe. This has also caused youths to reshape and reevaluate their trust in governments. Today, as I speak, youth organizations in the global community have been positioned with the noble task of finding ways to identify problems that occurred which have affected the youth as a result of the pandemic. For example, some of the pressing issues facing young people include high unemployment, displacement, poverty, lack of access to education, insufficient skills, mental health, and hunger. The sudden impact of this global crisis gives youth across the globe an opportunity to have their voices heard, to reshape their destiny, and to be involved in the recovery process by being instrumental in growing stronger and safer and healthier communities for the future. However, the recovery efforts will have a lasting effect and will serve as a reminder to future generations, according to the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. There were 110 million school-age students from around the globe who had limited access to education due to the onset of the pandemic. As a result of this, there was the closure of schools and universities, as well as youth centers and public spaces. The restriction of movement prohibited economic opportunities, a lack of employment, and served as a higher risk of exclusion among youths in society. Therefore, the DNA envisions a new course for a new generation of Bahamians. The vision then and now is to ensure that government policies have a positive impact on the majority of the people and not just a selected few, but particularly the youth of our nation. The young people of our nation have been disenfranchised and marginalized continuously. The unemployment rate for young people before Doreen and COVID-19 was 25% and is expected to rise further. We do not believe that sufficient focus has been placed in our school curriculum on civic education, conflict resolution, and self-centered learning that focus on each student. Neither are we satisfied that there is sufficient focus on mental health in our nation, particularly among the youth, which is steadily growing. The education system of the Bahamas has been pegged at a D average, with the majority of young people leaving school ill-prepared to find jobs in the Bahamian economy. We in the DNA believe that this is largely due to the one-size-fits-all approach with our education system. Many Bahamian youths do not see themselves in the education curriculum put forth in the public sector. Therefore, we must cater to our academic students who want to pursue professional careers in education, healthcare, law, banking, engineering, medicine, and others. However, we must also cater to future athletes, artists in culture, music, and all forms of arts, technical professionals, entrepreneurs, and agriculturists, among others. We are a diverse and growing society, so this allows the education system to become diverse. Today, thousands of our young people in the Bahamas were unable to continue their education while on lockdown because of our educational system, which was not equipped for the 21st century and learning. These youth lack access to computing devices or internet access to conduct their work online. They are also uncertain as to how and when they will be able to take their national exams to pursue higher education or seek employment. Other issues that continue to plague our society include teenage pregnancy, the lack of community centers, the lack of sporting and training facilities for youth athletes, and the lack of equal access to education for physically and mentally disabled young people. As a young Bahamian, I support the vision and leadership of the DNA to transform our educational system with enhanced programs for youth, sports, and cultural development. Our education policy will focus on the fundamentals, ensuring that every child leaving the public school system can read, write, count, and function as an individual living in a global community. No child will be left behind. A DNA government will ensure that students are leaving school with skills sufficient to gain employment and become business owners if they so desire. We will focus on character development, conflict resolution, and mental health awareness to develop good law-abiding citizens in our country. We will ensure that no child again is left behind. The DNA is remaining steadfast and committed to empowering our nation's youth and indeed the Bahamian people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shakira. That is a spirited, and it's always good to hear from the young generation. As a matter of fact, the majority generation, as I like to call them, because this is the country that we will be passing on to them, and they probably have the greatest stake. So in the DNA, we have always recognized the importance of having young people be front and center, because it's really the world that we're handing over to them. So thank you very much, Shakira. And of course, we look forward to great things from you. Moving right along in our presenters, our next speaker is our Vice Chairman, Derek Smith, and he will be speaking on agriculture and food security. Vice Chairman Derek Smith, thank you.
I'd like to say a very pleasant good evening to the Bahamas and all of you folks that are around the world, because I know we have some persons from the US that are watching us. My topic is basically dealing with food security in the era of COVID-19, or containing COVID-19 impact on Bahamian agriculture post-COVID. I have 5 minutes to say what I have to say. I don't know if I will take 5 minutes, but I'm sure that whenever they're ready, they will cut me off. My mother always said, hard-headed birds don't make good soup. Okay, that was always a saying. And then she said, if you don't listen, you will feel. About 12 years ago, I came home back to the Bahamas, and I approached the then FNM government with a comprehensive plan of agribusiness, industrial, technological city for Andros, which encompassed basically a food, technology, processing, dehydration, and eventually food security through what I call food vaults. The plan entails several different things. That is utilizing the involvement of every large and small scale family island farmer and every backyard home grown producer. It also entails various packing houses. That's the use of various packing houses in the family island as mini production, manufacturing, and collection plants. There was also training in place for theory and practical ways for farmers with technological support, including to improve their crop yields. Farmers would be compensated on the spot. Here's your skin, here's your banana. All of this was privately funded, asking nothing from the government except for the land. The farmers were supposed to be the shareholders and having vested interest in this project. We worked along with NEMA to ensure that we were basically keeping up to the required standards and the qualities in order to have ample storage to meet the demand in the event of an emergency or disaster. So there was a ready market, not only for farmers, but also for fishermen. Whatever they can produce, we would take. The project was called the Joseph Project, which was eventually plagiarized, stolen, and became known as BAMSI. That was then. Let's fast forward 10 years. I didn't come here to throw anyone particularly under the bus, nor to say, I told you so. But today, we are all under the wheels of COVID bus number 19, I would say. We're all under that wheel, being rolled over by what we call the competent authoritative bus driver, while inside his band of merry men or ministers, they're singing, the wheels of the bus go round and round, round and round, seemingly oblivious to the carnage that is taking place underneath the bus as the dead and the wounded are just left behind, whether they be farmers or whether they be citizens. That's a pretty grim picture. But truth being told, that is where we are at right now, under the red bus, at the mercy of the competent authority. Some of you may say the government is not responsible for COVID bus 19. Things happen. Yes, that is true. But some things also did not happen, what should have happened. You know, while I was writing this particular speech, it was raining. This was last week, Tuesday. It was really raining, pouring hard. And I could hear the raindrops pelting like rocks on the roof. I got stuck in COVID, not really stuck, but in Freeport during this COVID lockdown. And then I thought about all of those persons, because whenever I took off in an airplane, I would look down at the houses in Grand Bahama, and I would see a carpet, a blue sea of tarpaulins covering every other house roof, and many, many more without. I think of the patients that were caught in the Rand Memorial Hospital, the tents that were just recently blown down, okay? The winds howling outside, but the homes and the medical facility are compromised, still compromised. The same season that brought the destruction is here again. 9 months later, we're still not prepared for another disaster season. 10 years later, since I first presented the practical concept of food security to them, are we there yet? As the kids say, on a long, endless journey. It's always this long, endless journey to food security. Do any of you remember back in the 70s, the government had a slogan, the slogan was self-sufficiency by 1980. Are we there yet? Now, the nail in the coffin of things that should have happened, that could have happened, is that there are still persons whose roofs were damaged since Hurricane Francis in Grand Bahama and other places, Hurricane Jean, and Hurricane Michelle. They're still standing on the promises of what I call the yellow bus driver. Did I lose my speech? Did I lose you? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, okay, I'm not sure because the screen just disappeared. I just wanted to be sure. I don't want to be speaking to myself. 9 months later, like I said, we're still in for another disaster season. 10 years later, we still at the same spot. Like I said, the nail in the coffin of things that should have happened, that could have happened, is that there are still persons whose roofs were still damaged since Hurricane Francis, Jean, and Michelle. They're still standing on the promises of the yellow gold rush bus drivers. I am a part of Farmers United, the chat group. There I see and I hear firsthand, I'm talking about firsthand experience, what farmers are going through. Okay, I hear their secondhand plight and sometimes the plight of simple struggles that they go through. Some of them are requesting or begging for a government veterinarian to assist in ailing animals. The response is few and far between or hardly ever a good response. The result is usually that. Farmers begging for feed assistance. Can you imagine their plight for their animals during COVID? If the competent authority did not allow the farmers to care for his flock or for his animal, then it is only fair that the competent authority be the person that actually provide or feed those animals. Farmers wanting to know, is their abattoir going to be open consistently? The opening and the closing hours showing up and not having the abattoir open? Farmers begging, that's the slaughterhouse as we call it. Farmers begging for the privilege to have title or full use of their crown land from the government, and still, after all of these years, nothing. Farmers waiting around for the government tractor or the machinery to show up for months or for weeks, losing precious time while some of the machine operators treat the machine as if it's their own private side money-making gig. Farmers not initially being treated as essential services shows the mindset of this government and previous government of what they really think of farmers, that they are non-essential. Let's look at the Ministry of Agriculture budget. The paltry or meager sum that is allocated to every budget is usually lost padding what I call administrative costs and bureaucratic service loss, doled out mainly through BAIC, who ironically is also one of the biggest competitors for the farmers. The few challenges along with non-consistent agriculture direct funding or access to funding tells the farmers and fishermen exactly what the government think about them and their industry. This is more so for the farmers than the fishermen. The way forward. What is the DNA's way forward? The DNA recommend and envision now more than ever that we must make our food our medicine rather than our medicine our food. This is done in conjunction with the various government ministries, meaning through Ministry of Health, Ministry of Education, or Department of Social Services. This leads to a healthier nation. The next thing we envision is grow, buy, eat local. This is done in conjunction with, again, the Ministry of Agriculture, local vendors, Customs Department, Consumer Affairs, allowing the money to basically circulate and remain in the local economy, thereby empowering and bringing much needed income and demands to the farmers. Building up and maintaining our foreign currency reserve as a result of that. That's if we grow, we buy, and we also eat what is local. If grown or raised Bahamian, we buy Bahamian. The DNA will implement what I call a moratorium and ban on some products that can effectively and consistently be supplied locally, constantly updating and checking through enforcement by law, of law. You need to put law behind this. Free enterprise will prevail in some cases, but the increased duty will be cost prohibitive for foreign buyers. Grow and show. That's another one of our themes. In the Bahamas, we do a disservice to ourselves when we only grow a product and eat a product. One use. We must explore and find many ways and uses of the various products that are at our disposal. For example, we have tomatoes. Why can't we just rather than just selling the fresh tomatoes? What about growing and eating the tomato? What about showing the bottle or the canned tomatoes, tomato ketchup, tomato paste, etc.? We must increase our manufacturing capability. We will also improve quality control of product and food safety through education, training, and technology. We will get our food and our produce to meet export or international standards. Thereby, we will be able to open up what I call the international market. This international marketing opening will be done in conjunction with government-private partnership, the Bahamas Chambers of Commerce. Okay, the government will source ready and burgeoning markets for Bahamian produce, emphasizing taste and health from a green, organic economy. The next thing we will do is Go Green Bahamas. Now, I know you say that's politics. That's what it is. Go Green Bahamas. But I'm talking about eating green, emphasizing green organic economy by encouraging totally organic certified farms or farmers, which usually can demand more actually in price when it comes down to export. Pesticides management. The elimination and ban on pesticides have long been eliminated and banned from use around the food and agriculture sector, but yet some of these same pesticides show up in the Bahamas. Then we will also improve the irrigation system of the Bahamas. This will be done by a national drive to provide water for farmers, okay, a good delivery system of water by encouraging the development of what I call a secured rainwater catchment system. We get plenty of rain, we utilize it. Then there's also the use of what we call a solar pump installation. Such measures will improve yields from farmers and provide necessary water for their herds and also for their usage for their plants. This is especially so for the southeastern Bahamas or any of what I call the grid farmland. Extra energy from solar pump can be sold back into the grid. These systems also promote clean energy and less dependency on diesel and gas, thereby earning what I call carbon credits for our country. Some of you might not understand carbon credits, but that's where the world is actually moving now. Drip irrigation will be encouraged and promoted. This system saves water and gives better yields and better water management. We will also refurbish what I call the parking houses that are there, the islands that are scattered with government unused, unkept parking houses. They must be refurbished, improved for proper use or manufacturing and packaging of products. Freezer space can be improved and used for fish depot for fishermen, or farmers may require freezer space. Entire buildings can also be leased. They're just sitting there, falling apart as usual. When not in use, horticulture classes can be implemented so that farming can be taught to what I call school students. Implement agriculture and horticulture. Implement horticulture in the elementary schools and agriculture, including technological aspects in the high school. Promising and interested students can retain their interests and make more scholarships available for them. The essential workers. Finally, government and citizens must prioritize and fight the cause for the farmer and of the farmer. We must recognize the role that the farmer plays going forward in this COVID-19 era. When the quarantine was announced, every person made a beeline to the hospital, to the police station, to the media, to the politician. No, 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 and no. But no, they made their beeline basically straight to the food stores. Without the farmers, no need to go there. Then the DNA will put our money where our mouth is. That saying has never been truer than now. If we are to change this economy, grow it internationally, boost employment and technology in areas of essential discovery, eat healthier, live longer, and less morbidities like strokes, hypertension, diabetes, heart diseases, we must put our money where our mouth is. By increasing the agriculture and fisheries budget substantially and using the funds to help the farmers as directly as possible, we can turn this country around in quick time. They must taste, touch, and feel the money. I'm talking about the farmers, using it responsibly and prudently. Free up and empower them by giving or leasing clean, clear titles to the land, to them. Some of them have been holding those lands for years, but yet they do not hold them. This would provide collateral to propel them forward. Free them so that they can free us from foreign dependency food supply as much as possible. Then we must encourage every Bahamian that may be interested in having a piece of land to try their hand in an area of agriculture as they may choose or in areas that they are needed. If worked consistently for 6 years or a given time period, then the land is theirs to do as they wish. Their productivity from the use of the land can be measured and recorded, and then they can be awarded by the amount of produce that they yield. This will encourage more to try their hand for a tangible goal or a tangible end. I'm wrapping up. Disaster mitigation, the way forward. Now, everybody said the government is not responsible. Who is responsible? Some of you might say, as I intimated earlier, the government did not cause or see the COVID-19 coming. But remember, they are the bus drivers. They are the competent authority, the chief honcho. How many hurricanes have we had under both governments? Too many to enumerate. Could you tell me one, just one, where we have ever been prepared or have been prepared to mitigate these losses and handle the aftermath? Usually, we are caught year after year, year in, year out. Every hurricane season, unprepared. Hurricane shelters not ready and unfit. No mandatory evacuation plan, no after disaster contingency plan in place. We have NEMA, yes, but only in name. Seems like some other person always comes up and usurps NEMA's authority. We've never had so many disaster this and disaster that, and minister of this and minister of that, chairwoman of this and that. But the more titles, the more the disorganization, and all of a sudden, the competent authority becomes the incompetent authority. I am not being critical. I listen, I simply listen to the cries of the Bahamian people. Am I being political? Yes, because I am talking about governance. Good or weak governance affect the lives of every man, woman, boy, and girl. The world is filled with risk. But when you have a weak government or weak governance zone where elected or public officials cannot assume their responsibility in protecting your property, your rights, and not providing basic needs and effective and efficient management skills, this puts you, your property, and the public and their lives and their property at risk. Their failure leads to broader and more failures, economically, socially, physically, and politically. Hence, the complaints and the frustrations begin. And because of incompetence, the whole area or situation falls apart. Sometimes resulting in loss of home, loss of property, loss of health, and even loss of life. That is how a weak governance or government begins, and poor decisions are made that affect our lives. These decisions affect our lives for good or bad and can breed inequality, widening the gap between the haves and the have-not. It's the have-nots that I'm concerned about, that cannot catch themselves and are caught up in this vicious cycle of trying to put food on the table or use the money to go see the doctor to check on that lump in my breast. But I can't afford the doctor now, or fix that roof with the tarpaulin on it. Food is priority. My child must eat. The roof can wait. The lump can wait. And you know the end results of the lump in the breast. Wrapping up right now, the Bahamian people gave the competent authority the benefit of the doubt of the risk that were and are involved in this COVID-19 era. But because of missteps surrounded by uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, and lack of strong coordination that did not involve others outside of their inner circle or sanctum, and the lack of local level delegation of responsibility, in the case of the Family Islands, the disaster risks and unwarranted frustrations were not mitigated. He did not trust us, and we did not and do not trust him, nor any of his yes men in the bus. Many months ago, the Prime Minister agreed to see the farmers. The farmers went to see him out west. When they got out there, the PM jumped in his car, not along with the Renwood Wells went inside with the former minister. He jumped in his car. They pulled off. The PM was spotted leaving through the back door. I have never ever felt so hurt and embarrassed for a group of people. I felt for those farmers that day. These were hardworking, honorable men that came to see the most honorable man, but were thrown under the bus by the then Minister of Agriculture. As he, the PM, did not recognize farmers then, I am not surprised that he does not and did not initially recognize farmers now as essential workers. That is okay, farmers. They have passed the halfway mark, or I would say 2/3 mark already. Time ain't long. There is a deficit of trust in the competent authority and his minions, or ministers, sorry. Unless there is true and honest collaboration with competent local farmers, the Bahamas government will continue to feel its way forward through the maze of incompetence and will never get the full yield from the harvest of the farmers. The Bible says, don't muzzle the ox that treads the grain. I say to this government, free the farmers, monetize them. If you don't, the DNA will. Thank you.
Well, that was a mouthful, DC Derek Smith. I'm wondering, you might have missed your calling as a pastor, because I was told long ago, you never give a pastor the microphone. But anyway, it was a very, very comprehensive, I repeat, comprehensive and in-depth look at agriculture and food security and the problems in our country. And you know, I mean, it's a vexing situation. It's been going on since I was a young man, and I'm hoping that this new environment and these new issues these new challenges that we're facing would really and truly be the impetus for us to have change in our attitude towards agriculture and food security. But without further ado, and I'd like to just remind everyone, we're going to have questions and answers after the speakers. So hang in there. You'll have a chance to ask us questions. And so without further ado, I'd like to introduce our next speaker. He is a Grand Bahamian businessman. So he is on the ground in Grand Bahama. He's experienced what it's like to live and conduct business in that Grand Bahamian environment of all those challenges that they've been facing. And he is an advocate. And so I would like to introduce you to Mr. Darren Cooper. Thank you very much, Mr. Cooper.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me? Thank you so much for having me. Can you hear me?
We can hear you clearly.
Thank you so much to the leader of the DNA and your executive team. Thank you so much for this opportunity to be able to share. And many of you may know of the challenges in Grand Bahama from the 1990s, from Hurricane Floyd, and as we continue to come to grips of, I think every 2 to 3 years of hurricane, and continue to rebound. Now dealing with first in the lifetime for us, a pandemic of the COVID-19, and businesses still coming to grips of getting up and running. However, Grand Bahama continues to go through its challenges, but I think it's fair to say that the future of Grand Bahama can and will be bright. There are some things that needs to be put in place, and once those key things are put in place, I think we'll be just okay. One of the main things, and first and foremost, that needs to happen in Grand Bahama, there must be a making up. And I use that word, making up. You know, when boyfriend and girlfriend break up, you got to come together and you got to help them get together and try and sever that relationship. There must be a making up of the Grand Bahama Port Authority and the government of the Bahamas in order for this island to take off and for us to begin to see some real economic empowerment and investment on this island. There has to be a roundtable discussion, and differences needs to be severed, and issues needs to be addressed so that we can move forward in Grand Bahama. Grand Bahama is a very well structured, very good infrastructure, plenty land for investment, some good and clean beaches, and we are ready and poised for investment. One of the things that is challenging for us and continues to stagnate investment is the fact that we don't have, and not just since the passing of Hurricane Dorian, but we need to have a state-of-the-art, proper, well-renovated or well-built hospital, medical facility that can deal with issues and crises and situations that arise on the island of Grand Bahama. We need to remove those 40-foot trailers that we have at what we call our international building. It's not an international airport. We need to have a state-of-the-art international airport. Needs to happen. Government needs to take ownership of its ports of entry. Those are key things that needs to happen here on Grand Bahama. Our landing fees are very expensive. Our docking fees are very expensive. And with a proper airport and proper international airport, with landing fees remaining to what it is now, will continue to pose a challenge for us and for our investors here on the island of Grand Bahama. And so we need to have our hospital
We need to have our airport. And we don't just need to have these things labeled as a hospital and labeled as an airport. We need to have it state of the art, well run, well built, and prepared for any disaster or any emergency that this island can be faced with. I heard Mr. Smith spoke, and very timely as relates to SMEs. SMEs are the engine that run and is running the island of Grand Bahama. And I think the present government is, the budget now, it's fair to say, will reflect and assist small SMEs, but I think it's too late. There are so many SMEs that were on life support, and the plug was pulled from those businesses, and now you're trying to resuscitate what has already been buried. And so the budget that's being debated now, it's too late for some of the businesses in Grand Bahama, but government needs to put in place concessions and concessions for small businesses in Grand Bahama. We are the ones that pay the tax back. We are the ones that the bills for foreign investors and investors that comes with big corporations are given so many concessions, when small businesses have to pay every tax and is railroaded for tax here on the island, the 12% of value-added tax, which is paid back by SMEs. And we have investors that come, and in their heads of agreement and in their agreement they have where there is no tax, they have tax breaks, and then they get these many concessions that small businesses don't get to embrace. And so I think government needs to understand, in order for us to have a bright future, we need to have SMEs empowered and strengthened and ready for whatever is ahead of us. One of the things that is also a huge challenge here in Grand Bahama for small businesses, we continue to request with this particular government promise to be transparent and accountable. We've asked and we've requested through the Ministry of Grand Bahama a meeting with the Prime Minister and his executive team, that instead of the government investing 65 plus millions of dollars of the tax money that we're going to have to pay back into the Alokaya property, if they had done what they did in Eleuthera and we would have been able to say to them, why not consider the former Xanadu property? Why not consider the former Royal Oasis, even if we do the Royal Oasis in stages, rather than spending $65 million of the taxpayers' money in a property that's now closed, in a property that you laid off and you bought it because you didn't want to lose jobs, when the Xanadu property has 45 marina slips for yachts that can come in, has a hotel property, room property that can house up to at least about 300 rooms, and one of the best beaches on the island. We are asking and we are suggesting to governments now and in the future, if you're going to be successful, you're going to be successful with the hand-in-hand partnership with small SMEs and with business owners that have good ideas and have what it takes to invest and to rebound this wonderful island that we call Grand Bahama. Grand Bahama is very well structured and has what it takes to be a good, well-invested island. And so we want to encourage the DNA, the future government to come, wherever it may be. We want you to know that SMEs have a role to play in the success and the rebuilding of our island. And so once again, I know there are more suggestions and ideas that can be given from Grand Bahama. Those are some of the key areas that I believe if we can get off the ground and up and running and make sure we're doing it right, we'll be better off here in Grand Bahama, the second city that is ready for the rebound and the rebirth of what's to come in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cooper. Darren Cooper, listen, you know, that was a refreshing presentation, because it seems like all of the people, when they speak about Grand Bahama, they speak about it in dire terms, and what you gave was a hopeful presentation of what can be. And it's interesting, and I've also lived in Grand Bahama for many years as a younger person, and I remember those days of Grand Bahama's heyday. And Grand Bahama is a well-structured city, or Freeport, you know, and so the potential is there, and it's just a matter of good policy that can have Grand Bahama or Freeport, and Freeport will drive Grand Bahama and have it turning around. So I just like to say that that was a very, very inspiring presentation from Grand Bahama and Freeport, and you know, I
just
think
want to be able, if I could, just to make sure that when you do speak, you know, let's not just say Freeport. They get very touchy when you say Freeport. It's Grand Bahama, and that's Grand Bahama from the east all the way to the west. Freeport is just the city, and so I just want to be able to say that to you, sir.
well, I like I said, I live, so I know, I know firsthand. But listen, thank you again, and we appreciate it. And listen, I believe I'm very hopeful. You know, I'm very hopeful. Sometimes we get stuck in feeling doom and gloom and believe that nothing's going to change because it hasn't changed in so long. But that's not necessarily so. So we look forward to those changes in short order in Grand Bahama. I tell you, DNA, we believe in Grand Bahama. So thank you very much again, Mr. Cooper. Without further ado, and for those who are listening, I want you to know that we're going to take questions. It's a town hall meeting where we're going to listen to all of the presenters, and it will be available for questions and answers after the presentation. So moving right along, we're going to go to our Vice Chairman of Youth Affairs, that is Miss Kelly Roll. Let's welcome Kelly Roll. Thank you very much, Kelly.
Good afternoon to everyone on the panel, my fellow DNAs and everyone around the Bahamas joining us through Zoom and Facebook. Whether we believe it or not, we the millennials are an important factor in our country's future. It is mainly our way of life that is on the line. Decisions being made now are essentially going to affect us and that of our children. I do not know about you, but I want a future where I know I had a say in how it was shaped. We have the power to affect change in the Bahamas. It's important that we stop being cavalier and start taking pride in being active about our futures. We are in the position to make history and bring the Bahamas back to its former glory. We must get out of the thought that our wants and needs do not matter. We must stop believing that we do not have a voice and that our voting or not voting does not matter, because it does. It all counts at the end of the day because it says we care. Think about it this way. What we choose to stand or not stand on now will affect our children and their futures. I believe that sentiment alone should be our driving force to finally want to take a stand. What was acceptable years ago is no longer acceptable in today's world, which is forever changing. Millennials, we must no longer take a lax stance when it comes to the way of life for us in our own country. This is our home. It is time that we finally start making contributions that will not only make our lives better, but help propel our country into the future while keeping our country's core values. We must keep to our Bahamian traditions because that is what sets us apart from the rest of the world. This is our country too, and we must start fighting for it. We have that right. How successful we are in our tomorrow depends on what we decide today. No more sitting back and allowing people stuck on what was able to slide in the past decide what they think is right for the next generation. No more accepting empty promises, and no more going back and forth thinking we have no way out. We have a right to want what we feel is best for us. We have a right to speak out when we are not being treated as if we are a priority. We have a right to have a voice. How are we going to continue to complain about the constant pressures we feel under this economy and the unfairness shown towards us if we refuse to do anything about it? Real, genuine action is what it's going to take if we want to see changes. Finally, start taking an interest in what is going on in our country. Step away from all the social media platforms and tune into the news or read the newspaper every now and again. Get in tune with what is happening around us. We need to start educating ourselves with what is going on so that when the time comes, we can make good, sound decisions about what we need to be done. Silence bears no fruit. Constant complaining bears no fruit. Only action will. You want minimum wages raised? Let us do something about it. You want the government to start looking into other avenues to create more jobs? Speak up. You want your children to receive a better education with better environmental conditions? Fight for it. The only way we can have our voices heard is by voting. Believe you me, it does make a difference. But before we raise our voices, let us make sure that we are well educated on the matter at hand and not just taking the word of the government. So to my fellow youths of the Bahamas, I say it is time to stand up and fight. Fight for what is ours and what will evidently be our children. The luxury now in their present is what we fought relentlessly for so they can prosper in their lives. Let us fight for our country. Let us fight for our Bahama land. Good afternoon again, everyone, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kelly Roll. It was a very spirited and, very spirited and emotional and very uplifting. And, it's when I listen to the youth leaders in our organization, it reassures me that the future of the country is in good hands. And when we've finally moved on, we will hopefully have left a country that the young people will be able to live in and enjoy and to pass on to theirs. Well, thank you very much, Kelly. We appreciate that. And moving right along, our next speaker will be Mr. Lester R. Cox. He is a noted and known radio personality, media personality, a business coach, a businessman, and an advocator of the new city. So I'd like to just welcome to everyone, Mr. Lester R. Cox. Welcome, Lester.
Hey, Omar, thanks for the invite, man. Totally appreciate you. To the leader, Renthia, to the deputy leader, Mr. Bashimi, and all the officials from the DNA, and all of you participants on the call. I'm excited to share with you because the Bahamas is in Bahamas right now. We are heading for a serious social revolution, and we ought to begin to appreciate that. In the Bahamas, we've got some unique words that nobody else have. Words like juk, yak, babay, words like bungi. These are unique words. I was in Canada as a very young man, as a teenager, and we saw a Canadian girl with nice shape, and some Bahamian guy said, "Boy, she have a nice bungi in her hair." The Canadian guy came and said, "What's bungi?" So we've got some unique words in the Bahamas. One of a word that I really like is this word that we use in the Bahamas, and no other country uses the word the way we use it. This word is called swing. And when we talk about swing in the Bahamas, we really mean that you got fooled, that you missed the obvious. And I'll tell you, in the Bahamas, we've gotten swung by foreign direct investors, and we've gotten swung by people who are being advised in our country and we've been missing the obvious. It's like if you ask somebody about relationships, if you say, "So what makes a great relationship?" The average person will tell you instinctively, and this would be wrong. They would tell you communication. And they would be absolutely wrong, because if communication was the most important thing about a relationship, then speakers like me and pastors and people who talk a lot, they'd have the best relationships. But there's no evidence of that. You know what makes a great relationship? What makes a great relationship is the vision you have in your mind of the person you want to be with. And you've got to see them, and you've got to hold that vision as high as you can. That's what makes a great relationship. And so what I want to talk to you about today, and I want to talk to you today about how we miss the obvious in the Bahamas. If you ask anybody, you ask them, "So what's the multiplier in the Bahamas? What really makes the Bahamas go?" They will tell you stuff like foreign direct investment, but that would be an absolute lie. And I'll show it to you. If you go on the World Bank's website and look at the Bahamas GDP from 1960 to 2018, you will see something that's incredible. You will see that we have doubled our GDP every 6 to 7 years, double it. So in 1960, the Bahamas GDP was $170 million. By 1966, that GDP had gone up to $340 million. Did that happen because some great foreign investor came by? No. What happened was we had this thing called the Burma Road Riot. We had a social revolution coupled with the fact that we wanted to go to internal self-government. So what caused our GDP to jump was not investors. What caused it to jump was a social revolution. The taxi drivers decided, you know what, we're not taking this anymore. And so they shut the whole country down for 2 weeks. And then the leaders at the time, the UBP, they saw this and they realized, you know what, we need to take this country to internal self-government. Otherwise, we're going to have some serious problem with these black people. And folks, in 6 years, the GDP doubled. But folks, guess what happened? When people take to the streets and they start to feel that power, they don't stop that. Then we decided it was time for one man, one vote. We decided it was time for one woman, one vote, woman suffrage. And folks, something interesting happened. During that period, when we got internal self-government, the UBP decided it made sense to change the money from pounds to US, from pounds to dollars. Think about that, folks. Think about how incredible that was for a small country to change your money. Think about that, folks. And we did it. And guess what happened? 6 years later, our GDP doubled again. So by 1966, we doubled our GDP. And then this whole social revolution that was going on, people decided it was time for majority rule. It was time for women to be involved. We decided it was time to take our country from the UBP. And so we took it from them in 1967. Folks, 6 years later, when the PLP took over the country, GDP was at $340 million. By 6 years later, they had doubled the GDP to $690-something million. I want you to think about that. Wasn't that a social revolution? Think about this. So I want you to go with me and really think about this, because we've got to understand what's going on in our country. Otherwise, we're going to be fooled by foreign direct investors and the foreigners who will be telling us things that makes no sense when you look at the data. And so when the PLP took over the country in 67, by 72, we had doubled the GDP again. By 78, we had doubled it again. By 82, we had doubled it again. So this time now, the Bahamas GDP is well over $1.6 billion. And that's because some social revolution started to happen. So majority rule brought about independence. Independence brought about institutions like a Bahamian civil service. It brought about NIB. And folks, the social revolution, how we think about ourselves socially, is the thing that actually is the thing that multiplies our GDP, not foreign direct investments. But folks, something happened in 1992. We've been doubling GDP every 6 years. It didn't matter who ran the government, whether it was UBP, whether it was Pinland, and then Ingram took over in 92. And folks, I want you to think about what happened with Sir Lyndon. What happened with Sir Lyndon was trying to do it better than the UBP. And so we got caught in that cycle where we weren't really evolving. We were evolving as people, but we really weren't evolving our mindset. And so when Ingram took over, Ingram promised the people, he said, I got a better way. And we gave him a shot. And folks, Ingram brought in this thing. It was like a digital revolution. The radio stations, all of a sudden now we all have an opinion. And folks, by 1998, GDP doubled again. So by 1998, GDP under Ingram was $6.8 billion. He started off at around $3 billion. And that's because all the radio stations, this digital thing came up Bahamas, this happened. These are social things. But folks, after 1998, our GDP didn't double anymore. And you know why? Ingram also brought in another idea. It's called the Movable Properties Act, where we started to believe it was about foreigners. We started to believe it was only about tourists. And so we've seen no doubling of our GDP. If we had continued to develop as a people, if we had continued to evolve and not just try to do it better than the other guy, we would be now, folks, at 2018, if we had continued to double our GDP every 6 years, we would be right now at $40 billion in GDP. We would be in this hemisphere, we would be the richest country in this hemisphere based on GDP. We would be right there with Bermuda at around $60,000 per person. Right now, the Bahamas, it depends on who you talk to in terms of per capita income. We are between $25,000 and $30,000 per person. But you know, in our world, you know the people you meet every day, they're not making $30,000. What I'm saying to you is when we evolve socially, the GDP changes, the multiplier in GDP is not just foreign direct investment. The multiplier in GDP is how we evolve socially. And I want to tell you this. What I believe, folks, and this is why the DNA is such a great idea. The DNA really should be the voice of my generation, our generation. You see, the guys in the majority rule generation, their focus was doing it better than the UBP or doing it better than the other guy. Our focus should not be trying to do it better than the competent authority. Our focus should be on evolving that. Because it's so easy to do it better than all the guys who would have run our country before, because they missed the obvious point. The obvious point for us now is not just to have one person making all the decisions. Can you imagine how ridiculous that is? One person trying to make all the decisions for all our smart people? I mean, just think about that. Just think about how ridiculous that sounds in the 21st century. Imagine if we had independent cities. Imagine if we had a city in Grand Bahama where the people had real power to do what they needed to do. Imagine if we had a city in Andres where the people had the real power to do what they wanted to do. Imagine if we had a real city in New Providence where the people had the power to do what they wanted to do and didn't have to call anybody. Folks, that's the next evolution for us. And I'm telling you, if we go to city government is not just going to revolutionize the Bahamas. It's going to cause us to evolve into a different kind of person, different people. And I think the mindset of a party like the DNA, you guys can be an advocate for this thing. You know why the people in Lightfoot Key and Albany and Old Fort, you know why they love the Bahamas so much? You know why they love to be here? Some of my friends who are billionaires, they're riding out COVID-19 in the Bahamas. And you know why it's so great for them to ride out COVID-19 in the Bahamas? They can live in the Bahamas with no rules when you think about it. They can pull up with their boats behind their homes. They got that little fixed base operation at LPI, so they can fly in with their private jets with nobody checking them. And folks, that's what they want. And plus, they can lock their gate. They don't have to worry about the locals. Imagine if we had a city, folks, where we had our own marina port in, say, Coral Harbor, where we could pull up with our boats as well, nobody checking us, where we have our own fixed base operation at LPI, where we can fly in with our private jets as well. And then we can go to our city where we don't have to worry about overly conservative Bahamians who telling us stuff like what we can't do, that Bahamians shouldn't be allowed to gamble. Imagine that. So folks, our next evolution is city government, where we have more than one power center in the Bahamas. It is ridiculous to have one group of F&Ms running this whole Bahamas, or it's ridiculous to have one group of PLPs running this whole Bahamas. We need to have multiple teams running the Bahamas. You know why Trump could never destroy America? Trump could never destroy America because America has 50 power centers. They're called states. And in each state, they have multiple power centers in each state. They have county government, they have city government. So we should see the obvious. When we go to Miami, we're entering a city. The city has a mayor, the mayor has certain powers. And folks, that's our next great evolution. And I'll tell you, today in the Bahamas in 2018 dollars, our GDP should really be at $40 billion. Because if we double our GDP from 1960 to 1998, if we continue to double GDP from 1998, we would be right now at $40 billion in GDP. Folks, after this F&M budget year, our GDP is going to drop back to 2006 numbers. I want you to think about that and think about our next great evolution. You think about it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lester R. Cox. Lester, that was a compelling presentation. I must confess, I've been following your concept of city government for quite some time now, and it is something that I find very appealing. I believe there is nothing that should stop us from allowing Bahamians to be able to govern our own affairs in a more autonomous way. As you and I both know, we've been to places where these things happen, and all
that's right. We see it in China all the time.
Yes, and these are places, and I mean, if our economy doubled every couple of years, could you imagine how China economy has exploded in the last 20 years? So this is definitely something that I'm telling you. Well, the DNA, obviously, we are in support of local government for New Providence, so that's a start. But where you are going is somewhere where we must start to empower Bahamians to be able to achieve goals, not to be holding them down. And there's always been a culture in this country of leadership to hold people back. because the fear of if you allow people to get too powerful, you can't control them. But the DNA, we are not about that. We are about facilitating Bahamians and facilitating people achieving their full potential, because when more people succeed in the country, the whole country succeeds. But listen, thank you very much, Lester. We appreciate you. We appreciate your presentation. And I believe it's made an impact. And I look forward for us one day soon, having more autonomy and more say over our economy and our country. So thank you very much again. Moving right along again to our next speaker. It is, and of course, we have a very deep bench in the DNA. Sometimes it's difficult for people to see the rest of our bench because of our shining star, our leader. Our leader is just so dynamic. When she goes out there, she just explodes and shows the light of that potential that the country can have in that terms of dynamic leadership. So much so that those other leaders are fearful of even being on the side of her. But anyway, here it is. We're going to show another one of our deep bench, our deputy leader, Mr. Bushimi Bristler. Bush is going to speak on transportation in this new COVID environment. He is a transportation expert, a pilot, a businessman, and we look forward to his presentation on transportation in this new COVID environment. Welcome you, Bushimi Bristler, Mr. Deputy Leader. I see, looks as if looks like our feed to Bush.
Oh, sorry. So, okay. Hello. Hello. Can you hear me? Hello, Mr. Chairman.
I can hear you, Bush.
Okay. Good. Good afternoon, everyone.
Yes,
Good afternoon, everyone. How are you?
I can hear you.
All right, protocol has already been established, but before I start, Mr. Cox, you made a powerful statement when you said that the government is making decisions for a lot of smart people. And that's a very powerful statement. I hope persons like yourself would get more involved. I just wanted to say that before I forgot. Okay. In the first quarter of 2020, the Bahamas and the world was attacked by what is now regarded as the most deadliest healthcare pandemic in modern history. Despite the heroic efforts of essential workers and healthcare professionals, COVID-19 has not only claimed the lives of thousands, but it has decimated economies near and far. Here at home, the spread and impact of COVID-19 have exposed major class inequalities in our economic system. As was the case with Hurricane Dorian, the virus has again put a spotlight on the issues of illegal migration, in addition to highlighting the government's mismanagement of our fiscal resources. As conditions evolve, the Democratic National Alliance believes that now is the time to give focused attention to many of the lingering transport issues which threaten to impede our national development. While the virus has forced the marginal improvement of certain protocols, those protocols remain far from efficient. Anytime where social distancing has been declared as the new safety standard, countless transport services fail to provide Bahamians and residents with options that allow them to meet those requirements. After more than 40 years of self-governance, successive governments have failed to provide a safe and reliable public transport system and an official bus station to accommodate the rising number of non-motorists, particularly here in the capital. By now, in this age of technology, Bahamians across the country should be able to complete tasks like vehicle and license renewals from the comfort and safety of their homes using a verified online platform, which will require physical inspections for new and first-time licenses only, and allow traffic police to ticket those persons and those vehicles that don't meet standards. Equally important is the introduction of a safe and reliable public school bus system. These small but impactful changes will almost immediately have a positive impact on the day-to-day lives of residents across the province. Major changes must also come to our aviation sector. As a nation which depends heavily on air travel to bolster our international and domestic tourism industry, we must properly and effectively track both commercial and private aircraft using our airspace. This will require a greater level of oversight by the Bahamas Civil Aviation Authority, particularly in the Family Islands. It will require a new era of creativity and innovation as we find new ways to stand out in an increasing competitive regional and global sector. With that said, we must also immediately take the necessary steps to improve current health and safety protocols designed to keep passengers and airport staff safe. This will require the installation of sanitation stations, giving travelers easy access to hand sanitizers, as well as protective barriers at various ticket counters. As air travel is reestablished, the country must move toward the 24-hour use of major airports in the Family Islands, airports like Marsh Harbor, Exuma, North Luther, etc., with each being equipped with pilot control lighting to again ensure the safety of incoming aircraft and passengers. My fellow Bahamians, change is inevitable. A 21st century Bahamas is within our reach. We simply have to grab it. Acting as that vehicle of change, the DNA has developed a comprehensive plan to move these sectors and our country forward. A DNA government we will implement a unified bus system that services the entire Bahamas. We will revise the current routing system under the newly instituted unified bus system. We will implement pedestrian and vehicular road traffic training in public schools for all students. We will increase road traffic training for all Bahamians and require persons found guilty of violating traffic laws to undergo road safety courses as a part of their sentencing. We will strictly enforce vehicular condition laws and impound cars that are unlicensed or have violated public health and safety laws. We will stop the subleasing of individual taxi plates to locals and foreigners. We'll also set a limit to the amount of personal taxi plates one can own and create separation between those that have fleets of taxi cabs and those that are in the charter business. We definitely will strengthen laws pertaining to driving under the influence of alcohol. We will work towards making the downtown Nassau area a pedestrian area and commission work to begin in that regard upon consultation with stakeholders on the Downtown Redevelopment Committee. We will assess the structure of the St. Lyndon Pinley International Airport so as to increase airlift capacity. We will work with our American partners such as the Federal Aviation Administration or the FAA and the Department of Homeland Security to increase joint venture programs of airport security, maintenance workers, air traffic controllers, and other relevant personnel. We'll encourage the joint venture of radar equipment between us and our American partners to bring our aviation operations to world-class standards. We will provide greater security and maintenance of our radar equipment on the island of New Providence and selected islands around the Bahamas. Ladies and gentlemen, moving forward in the post-19 environment will not be easy. We will see many changes. Just as September 11 changed air travel, COVID-19 is going to change our way of life globally. So there is no path set for us to follow. We must now go where there is no path and leave a trail for the next generation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Leader. When we hear you speak on transportation, we know that when the DNA wins the election, our country will be in good hands in terms of our transportation and the way forward for transportation in the Bahamas. So thank you very much, Mr. Deputy, and for that spirited and that informative and comprehensive presentation. Moving right along, our next speaker, he is known for many years in the country for being a spokesperson, an activist, an agitator, an educator on Bahamians' resources, our natural resources, and also in fishing and game fishing. I've known him as an expert fly fisherman. So he has many, many hats. So I'd like to present to you and introduce to you today guest speaker on natural resources, Mr. Prescott Smith. Welcome, Mr. Smith.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, we can hear you clearly, Mr.
Yes.
Smith.
Thank you. Thank you, you and the leaders of your party for inviting me. It shows a level of commitment to true empowerment of Bahamians and not just talking about it. What I will share with you today is, you can show great wealth of a country, as many other countries have such resources. But more importantly, I will give you what are the solutions that would bring about the empowerment for our citizens. I will just give a brief background. I have studied resources, mineral resources, not only around the Bahamas, but all over the world, because I always wanted to know what was the real reason why so many people were being oppressed, not just in our country. And so it took me on a journey of researching resources all over the globe. But what I'm going to show you here, because as a captain, I can get and give you a course to steer, but I'm more interested in so that you know how to navigate yourself so you can understand what is our true position globally and why it is that one's administration after the next refuse to deal with a country that has so much wealth. So firstly, for a person who was always passionate about geography, this is very important information for you to know. In my research of resources all over the globe, I found that most of the mineral resources are located between 30 degrees north and south of the equator. So all of the blue area that you see here is bodies of ocean. And as you go around the globe, we're going to get to, you can see Australia, and you can see wide bodies of ocean. And then you come back around to South and North America. But the largest landmass within that zone is the continent of Africa. And notice Europe is completely outside of that zone. Okay? So that's important to know, that also the Bahamas falls within that 30 degrees north and south of the equator. So resources that you will see here are not anywhere around the globe because of various temperature. For example, mangroves can only grow in a certain zone, and we will get into that. So let's come to the Bahamas position based on what I shared with you. I
Hello,
showed you
Mr.
that
Smith.
most of the resources located globally.
Hello, Mr. Smith. I believe you're showing us a presentation. Just wanted
Yes.
to let you know that you can hit the share screen button, and then that will be visible to everybody else in the call as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, perfect. Are you able to see the screen now?
Yes, we can, Prescott. We can see it.
Yes, we can.
Yes, thank you very much. So I'll just go over it a few seconds here. What I shared is that most of the resources on Earth are located between 30 degrees north and south of the equator. And as you go around, you will see that the continent of Africa is the largest landmass within that belt. All of the blue area you're seeing is ocean. And then it's important to note that the Bahamas falls within that geographical zone. Also, it's important to know that no country in Europe falls within that zone. Okay, so we will go right here to show you where most of those So all of those countries outside of that zone, they gathered in 1884. And as you could see, the various countries that were there, including the United States, France, Portugal, and that is what we became known as the Berlin Conference. And that's because Africa, being the largest landmass with most of the minerals, fall within that zone. It's the richest continent in terms of the mineral resources on Earth. So here you can see that most of the world's raw material for chocolate, again, falls within that geographical zone. And you can see Europe here. You can see the United States. So when you eat a Snickers or a Mars bar, you know that. And why this is important, because like I said, for me to just tell you the Bahamas is such a rich country and such, you need to be able to back these things up. And so it's to bring full clarity so you'd understand why we've been exploited and what it is that you need to do to change the position. And again, you can see here, over 70% of the world's raw material for chocolate comes out of 2 countries in Africa. Let's look at coffee. Again, you will see Europe here, the United States, and then where all the coffee is grown around the world. So the first Starbucks was opened up in Seattle, but they can grow no coffee. And so it's not about who have gold or diamond or calcium or aragonite, but who's controlling it. Again, you would see the countries who dominate when it comes to consumption and the marketing of coffee versus those who grow it. The same thing with diamond. You'll see where most of the diamonds in the world come from. Again, the continent of Africa, where teak is found in the world. And important to note that the continent of Europe and North are outside of that zone. So let's come back to the Bahamas. What you would see unique about the Bahamas, its vast amount of shallow water. And so no country in the Caribbean or on Earth have the amount of shallow water flats that the Bahamas have. So that's important to note as well. What else is unique about the country? You have something we often hear about. People talk about a blue hole, and you can find them throughout the Bahamas. It's not unique only to Andros, but again, you have the largest concentration of blue holes in the world. Running along the coast of Andros, you have the 3rd largest barrier reef that's in the world, next to Australia and Belize. And that's 140 miles of reef system there. So we're going to come right into what makes the Bahamas such a unique country in terms of its many wealth that is unique and it's worth more than any gold or diamond mine. As I mentioned to you, the largest flats in the world, 3rd largest barrier reef, the largest tropical nursery system of mangroves in the Western world, Caribbean, largest concentration of blue holes, and our unique ocean, which our ocean alone, we should have no national debt. And I will clearly show you the details of that. So if you have the largest concentration of nursery of mangroves or mangrove forests, more than the United States, Cuba, Mexico, it means that it's a renewable resource. And so it makes the Bahamas And again, I will say boldly, the information I'm sharing with you, if I was speaking in front of the United Nations or anywhere in the world, it could not be challenged as not being factual, because you better be very sure that when you state something, especially in most cases coming from us, that you better have the facts to back it up. And so if you have a renewable resource like mangrove forests, and Bahamians know this information. You see poachers coming from Honduras, they come from Dominican Republic, Cuba, the United States, Japan, all fishing in our waters, not just because of the nursery system, but you have all the shallow banks. Again, another thing that's what's unique about our country is you have the purest limestone in the world. Now, for those of us, including myself, who grew up being miseducated that these things had no value like a gold or diamond or oil, to have limestone or what we call aragonite and sand, it is worth more than any gold mine or diamond mine in the world. The raw materials for all glass in the world, the two main raw materials are sand and calcium carbonate or limestone. Beyond air and water, it is the most used resource on earth. So when you think of all concrete, you think of the windshield in your car, the tires on your vehicle, the hairspray, thousands of products that you use every day. You get in a plane, the calcium carbonate is a major component in metal production and so forth. And so if you look at the government's upcoming budget, and this is for you to see here, which is very shocking. This is their present budget, and they're showing you that for aragonite, your royalty will be, for 1 year they had you at $17. And this year they had you at $19,000. Then you have $24, $0. And of course, you can look at sand and you will see the figures 56,000, which is an insult to Bahamians. You can look and see. And this is what politicians are going to be debating in the coming days ahead here, okay? So it's important for you to realize this is the kind of stuff that we have to put up with as citizens in our country at the end of the day, while the majority of our citizens are suffering, okay? So let's go here to so if you watch a documentary called Sand Wars 2013, and I recommend every Bahamian citizen should view this, and you would hear from people all over the world what I just shared with you, that beyond air and water, it's the most used resource on earth, okay? Here is a big mining operation in Grand Bahama, and they ship this raw material all over the world. Here's another major operation on the island of Grand Bahama. The island of Grand Bahama is a very unique place in my heart because the level of exploitation of that island while the people are suffering, it's always been very troubling to me. And I've made great lengths to bring this information forward just for you to know. And that's why I thank your leaders for the invitation, because having gone to cabinet over 15 years ago and found that I was offered all kinds of corrupt things to suppress this information, from Bahamians. So it made it clear to me that there are persons who are benefiting from this tremendous wealth in our country and do not want the citizens to be aware of it. So let's look at this here in Grand Bahama again. Here is Norway, which is the largest country with the largest sovereign wealth fund on earth, over $1 trillion. And yet Norway uses our deep ocean to put many billions into their sovereign wealth fund. And at the end of the day, Bahamians get pennies or the crumbs, I would say, at the end of the day. Here is another one. These are major oil giants from around the world. Some of the guests who have fished who said, Prescott, we bring our oil tankers in your waters. And it's amazing that your government is allowing this level of exploitation. We have no problem even paying as simple as $1 per barrel. And again, you have this one island alone, we should have many billions in surplus. You had mentioned, Brother Smith, in terms of the potential for sports fishing. We have the largest flats in the world, the largest bonefish population, yet the Americans spend, which has actually gone up now, it's at $46 billion on sports fishing. And we focus on an area of tourism that is not about true ownership, but again, giving us the bare crumbs. And you can see here, all of the blue is the deep ocean area and the light area is the flats. You can see that the Bahamas, all of the flats from Mexico to Belize, to Honduras, the only place in the United States of America that have shallow flats with bonefish on it is South Florida. And the only other portion in the US that have a very small area of mangroves is in Texas, and that's it. So the Bahamas have more resource than all of these countries combined, as you can clearly see here. I just wanted to share with you here, like one of the US leaders, he said, here is your country, cherish its nature, natural resources, cherish the history and romance for your children and your children's children. Do not let selfish men or greedy interests skin your country of its beauty, its riches, its romance. And I think it was important to share that with you here as I will show you this particular slide. And this is a live shot. I welcome you all who can hear. You should have this app and download it. It's marinetraffic.com. And this gives you a live shot. Again, you can see all of these various colors here, red, green. These are all ships that are in as we speak. All the green are commercial container ships, all the red are oil tankers, and all the blue are cruise ships. So let's look at all these cruise ships anchored in our waters right now. They're not paying $1 because they can have free anchorage. The container ships. This is not international waters because our maritime industry, we brag about flags rather than building a true industry that can empower so many of our citizens. Again, look at all of these oil tankers here. All the blue are cruise ships. And you can click on this and you'll see the name of the ship. You can see the name of the tanker, it gives you a description, all of that. And this is happening. So let's look here back at Grand Bahama. This particular, you can see them line up like I-95 and a traffic jam coming through. You know, all of this is our internal ocean. And what's unique about it is They all talk about using Grand Bahama because the ocean comes in very close and it allows them for these oil tankers to come in like you see here. You see all that? Presently, there are 3 of them right now. And this is live right here. And they're discharging all this.
Say that again, babe.
This is live. You see the oil tankers? They're discharging the crude into these various tanks here. And this is what makes the island. So Grand Bahama alone, the revenue was being received from just what is unique about this island. The Bahamas should have many billions of dollars in surplus. But what you find is persons whispering in our leaders' ears, we're giving away our country. And at the end of the day, they tell you about jobs. And what I wanted to end with, because there's so much information to share with you, and I look forward to making it available. And I wanted you to know that here is the presentation that was shown to the Cabinet of the Bahamas over 15 years ago. I did extensive research by traveling to the different islands. And so no government really have any excuse, because I went there for 4.5 hours and then 3 hours, only to find out that I thought that this information would end up to the public, and many years later. And so you are to be commended as the first major of those parties to actually invite, to share it with the public. And you have access to get the information out there and make it available. You know, because we have to change this mindset that we only have sun, sound, and sea. And so as I shared with you in closing, I've said this a few years ago. I said the Bahamas is the richest country on earth based on its renewable resources and its population. I haven't found anybody to challenge that yet, because it cannot be proven wrong based on the research. And I want to repeat it. I said renewable resources based on its population and the resources that we possess. So for example, Norway has 5 million in population, but Norway don't have the largest concentration of mangroves in the Western world. So if you protect it, you'll have more fish. And Bahamians are very brilliant people. We know this, but it's just connecting these dots. We hear about the poachers coming from all over the world. They come because of something unique that we have. The same thing here with our calcium carbonate. And so if you can have these mining operations that are extracting billions of dollars in calcium carbonate, but yet in the government budget, there is zero mention of it, as if it doesn't exist. I fish anglers who come to my lodge who say they build roads in Alabama, all over the United States from this raw material. And you go on and on with the level of exploitation. So you have Grand Bahama with the second largest nursery system in the country, the second largest freshwater supply, its vast pine forests, its unique ocean that alone is one of the global shipping lanes of the world. And so if the Bahamas put policies in place to make sure that people are paying because they're saving time and money, if we take control of our airspace, if we use our resources, whether they be, salt, not just a million tons here from Morton salt, but one day we should have our own salt on the shelf. And for those of you who may not be aware, salt industry was the largest industry in our country before we went to sponging, and tourism. And so you can see such salt operations all over the Bahamas. Here is Ragged Island. Here's one of the biggest ones that was in the island of Exuma. Here. All of this information is kept from our people, and we're wondering what we're going to do. These are viable industries. And so when you talked about renewable resource, Mr. Smith, these things are not unrealistic. We've had solar operations for hundreds of years in the Bahamas because these were all solar salt operations. So the Bahamas can have the bright minds in engineering. So we have the raw material to produce solar panels. This is another big salt operation on Long Island. And in the research I've uncovered throughout the country. And so I'm going to close because of time. We were able to touch on some of the many wealth in our country. But what you will see that there's no policy in place that allows this level of exploitation to come to an end. And so it doesn't matter if a country have all the gold or diamond or calcium in the world, if these are privately negotiated deals. And so I want to encourage you all as a board member of the Bahamas Natural Resources Foundation, because the goals of that foundation are very clear. We want to see a sovereign wealth fund established. Also want to see the proper documentation of the many resources in our country. Our University of the Bahamas engaged, and so that future generations can benefit. Thank you very much again for the invitation, and I look forward to sharing additional information.
Thank you very much, Prescott. That information, well, of course, I would have seen a lot of that before.
Yes.
Many years ago when you started. I remember meeting you back then, and it's just a shame that we've had successive governments since then, and there's been really no movement towards us gaining control of our natural resources. You mentioned the Sovereign Wealth Fund. The DNA has had the Sovereign Wealth Fund in our platform for the last 2 elections. So
yes,
we're hoping. We are moving towards that day when that will happen, and we believe that the time has come.
You made a very bold step, and you have to be commended because these things operate in secrecy. So as long as you continue to educate the population, that's how you will bring an end to the exploitation that is taking place. Thank you again.
Yes, sir. All right. Well, thank you again, Mr. Prescott Smith. Before we started, we had the Pledge of Allegiance. We'd like to, if Mr. Bathel Savion is there, we'd like for him to read, because this is a good time for us to read the preamble of our Constitution. Because when you look at all of those, the wealth of this country, you know, all of those islands that you were showing us, it's just incredible and unbelievable that, you know, us less than around 400,000 Bahamians, and we are not sharing in the wealth of this bountiful country. So, Mr. Savion Bathel, can you just read that preamble for us, so we can just hear it, and those who are listening can hear our birthright, because this is really our birthright. And, you know, and we are a people who are being denied our birthright. And so, Savion, are you there? No. All right, well, Savion, I don't know if you can be heard, but if you can, you just let me know and we can go on. But we're now moving in to the part of our program that is about our people, about the country, about those, the reason why we've done this. We want to always hear and do what is in the best interest of our Bahamian people, and also to hear from our people and be directed by what they want us to do, and also to answer the questions that they may have regarding a DNA-led government. So without much ado, would like to open it first to those who are, I guess, on Zoom. You just put your hand up and you will be allowed entry by the administrator to ask your question. So at this time, I would just like to open the floor. You put your hand up, there's a hand up option. You put it up, you'll be recognized, and we will take a question from you.
Hello, Chairman.
Yes, sir.
We have several questions that we have been collecting from Facebook. Just wanted to read some of them out. And
Okay.
these are directed, in most cases, to the leaders of the party. So the first question comes from Lamar Nathaniel Griffin on Facebook, who is commenting on the taxation of the Bahamas. Maybe you can expand on the taxation of corporate millionaires and billionaires. Also, he asks, the FNM said that they would remove VAT, but they raised it instead. What will the DNA do about VAT?
Well, as mentioned, first of all, in the Bahamas, there is really no taxation on profits. So millionaires and billionaires, that is one of the draws for our country. And so we have a state where those who are benefiting the most from our country are not paying their share. Our taxation system is a regressive one, where those who have less pay a bigger proportion of their income. And so we strongly believe that the tax structure must be fixed and it must be progressive as opposed to regressive. And those who have and are better able to pay and those who are benefiting more out of this country should pay more. And so I hope that answers his question. Is there another question? Any other questions? And
Yes.
especially for our panelists?
One moment. There is a question from Mickey Bow from Zoom, who is asking the leader of the DNA, where does the DNA stand on the legalization of cannabis and the rights of the poor and disenfranchised youth?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I think it was, and thank you for your question, and thank you to all the panelists and everybody that have spoken so far. I will speak a bit further to that in my wrap up. But to answer the question directly, the DNA was the political party that really took the lead and took charge in addressing this issue in multiple forms. The first form, which was something that we were very passionate about, was the decriminalization of marijuana, not to be confused with the legalization of marijuana. It was just to lessen the offense of young men and women who were found with small quantities of marijuana in their possession, to reform the law in that regard, where they are not charged with a record on with a police record that can hamper their future prospects in life, but rather that the punishment would be a little less, more stringent, perhaps some community service or somewhere along those lines. The DNA has not taken a position on the legalization of marijuana for recreational purposes. We did, in different forms, members of our body did attend some of the town hall meetings on marijuana and the legalization of the marijuana for recreational purposes to get more information and what the effects of that will be on persons that decided to consume marijuana for recreational purposes. I think there is still a lot of information out there that needs to be gleaned, but we have taken a definitive position on medicinal marijuana and the fact that we would be interested in exploring that seriously, and that being a potential for development once we have all of the information and the fact that this particular administration of drugs can be done so in a way that is safe and also in a way that brings a lot of relief to some of the issues that ail our people. So that's where we are.
There is another question on Zoom from Mr. Bastian to the chairman. If your party was in power, would you and your ministers take a pay cut to help the Bahamian people?
Absolutely. This, first of all, you know, when you're put into a position of leadership, and especially in times of difficulty, if you want to lead and you want the country to take a pay cut or to take or to undertake austere measures, you should lead the way. And we believe, as a matter of fact, I remember the leader made a statement regarding this, and so we made it abundantly clear that if you want the Bahamian people to tighten their belts and to get by with less, then as leaders, you should lead the way. You should be the first ones to take a pay cut. So that is the DNA's position on that. For sure, we would be the first ones to take a pay cut. Any other questions that before we?
Yes, Chrissy Brown on Facebook is asking, does this mean that there will be an introduction of income tax? That policy that the DNA supports.
Madam Leader, would you like to take that one?
Well, I think the position of the DNA has always been clear in the sense that we support a fair tax system, and that is that those who have more should pay more. And the tax system should not disadvantage the majority of individuals. The position that we had taken pre-COVID-19 and pre-Dorian and obviously the adverse impact that is having on our economy right now was to move in with a graduated approach to reducing, a gradual approach to reducing the value-added tax rate when we would have gotten into office, and certainly carry out a comprehensive reform of our tax system, one that's more equitable. And that may have included the introduction of income tax, because income tax is a form of tax that is progressive and that is the most equitable of the many different tax sources, that has less of an impact on those at the bottom of the economic scale or the social ladder. And so whatever implementation of income tax that the DNA proposed, I don't know if many of you recall, but our policy leading up to the general election was to do away with the business license fees and to convert into either a flat rate. But we also discussed the possibility of converting that business license fee into a corporate tax. And when you look at the challenges that we're faced with now, from the global community and the fact that our second industry is under attack now from diverse Black listings, from not just economic blocks, but also nation blocks and individual countries, this is becoming a real discussion now. And it's sad that it had to get to that point, because really we should have paved the way. We should have charted the way in the best interest of our people and not necessarily falling to the dictates of the outside community. But whatever introduction of income tax we do, it will be not to the detriment of the vast majority of the persons, particularly at the lower end of the social spectrum.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Leader. We're coming to the close of our allotted. We were actually supposed to go from 4 o'clock to 5:30, but I guess we had such excellent presentations and interactions that we went over by by about a half hour. So I'd like to give you this final 2 minutes, actually exactly 2 minutes, to say something. We had so many speakers here from the DNA. Our leader now has been pushed to the side. So I guess those people who are saying now that you have no one behind you, they can go out and say that they didn't give you an opportunity to speak today. But before I take more of your time, Madam Leader, go ahead and give
Yes,
to
thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to again say thank you to all of the persons that agreed to join this platform. We are very grateful, particularly for the non-affiliated DNA persons that joined this platform, Mr. Darren Cooper, Mr. Lester Cox, and Mr. Prescott Smith, who have been champions in their own right in the various, in diverse issues. As you would have seen, all the wealth of knowledge we would have gotten from Mr. Prescott Smith on natural resources. I'm certainly going to go back to this presentation to get some more, but we're certainly going to have him back on this issue and continue the dialogue. Darren Cooper himself is very well known on the island of Grand Bahama, whether it's through his advocacy for the improvement of small business development, or whether it's through his philanthropic work, which he's very well known for on the ground. And obviously you saw the passion that he spoke about as it related to the infrastructural development and the economic revival of the Grand Bahamian economy. And so we were grateful to have him share this platform as well. And to Lester Cox, who has just always been a visionary person, and this concept of city government that he has been heralding and championing for so many years, which I personally endorse, and I'm sure the DNA endorses it, because we do support the decentralization of government power. It is very key and very crucial to the continued growth and development of the Bahamian economy, and not only that, but the people, so that we bring government closer to the people, and so that there's more efficiency, which clearly we are lacking now. Obviously at the heart of our platform, and just trying to wrap in all of this in the short, brief moments that I've been given, the DNA is looking forward to a more diverse Bahamas, one that is more connected, better connected through improved infrastructure and through logistics. You would have heard our deputy speak in depth in that as it relates to our plans for transportation and so many other ideas that we have in there that we would like to see brought to fruition. Not least among them is making Grand Bahama a hub for travel and connecting the rest of the Caribbean to the Americas. There's so much opportunities in that, and of course that also ties into the natural resources that Prescott would have alluded to. What does this greater diversity entail? It entails an economy that's focused more on the productive sector. While I believe that we should continue to strengthen and diversify the service sector, we have paid lip service to the productive sector, and you would have heard our presentation by our National Vice Chair, Mr. Derek Smith, really speaking to the development of agriculture in the Bahamas and the expansion and moving toward food security. So that is very key and is central at the heart of our platform, not just lip service, but actually moving forward with the implementation of that. More diversity in the economy also includes an increased focus on the orange economy and the export of our culture through film and art and food and music. I get jealous sometimes when I look at Jamaica and I see that they've been very successful in the export of their culture. A lot of persons know they are artists. Of course, Bob Marley is perhaps the most recognizable one, but in this more recent generation, they've been able to promote a lot of other artists. And I believe we have the same level of talent and even greater to be able to do that. So to take advantage of not just music and art, but also our food, the export of our food, and the development of the film industry. The orange economy is going to play a major role in the diversity of the Bahamian economy and the growth of our people moving forward. And we also have this focus on the blue economy, which is the increased focus on our marine resources, whether that's the export of the resources or whether that's through marine and ecotourism. And you would have heard Prescott touched on that, as well as research. I saw a lot of persons talking about education and UB. And a DNA platform, just in a short form, really envisions a true development of the entire archipelago of the Bahamas. And that would mean then that a University of the Bahamas would not just be centralized in New Providence, but there are so many schools that can be placed on the various islands that are really feeding into the strengths of those various islands. And time will not permit me to go in depth in that, but I'm very excited about that. So we talked about the improved logistics, and that's by air and by sea. And I'm a big dreamer. I even see the Bahamas being connected by bridges. So I heard Prescott talk about the development of engineers. And that is why at the heart of our education platform, where we're focusing on STEAM, science, technology, and engineering, arts, and math, it's going to be the next set of generational leaders that we want to be pushing out. Will be those engineers, will be those persons in science and technology, will be agriculturalists, persons in farming, persons that are going to be looking into the alternative energy market, all of those things that will feed into our overall policy and platform of food security and energy security and the diversity of the Bahamian economy. And so you will see coming out of their development plan for the archipelago, showing what can be the strengths of each various islands, because before long, we've just been focusing on New Providence. A platform will feature the true national development of the Bahamian economy, greater control of our natural natural resources, a lot of persons speak to that. I saw on some of the feeds, persons said, what will we do to move toward that? Certainly we endorse this entire idea of the Sovereign Wealth Fund. We were the first, as our chairman mentioned earlier, to talk about a ministry just dedicated to natural resources and the exploration of that. But not only that, to be able to review whatever agreements are in place. And I'm very interested to see what those agreements are, because those resources can also, and the development of those resources and being able to get that wealth back into the hands of the Bahamian people can also speak to a better way of life where taxes will not have to be so high, where the cost of living will not have to be so high, and the standard of living of Bahamians can be improved and increased. The decentralization of government power, again, I talk about that, and that is where we support Lester. And we're going to be looking, where you see in this particular platform, we've displayed a lot of the talent that is in the DNA, and we have a wealth of talent within the DNA. But a DNA government, we are smart enough to realize and to understand that not all talent, all intellect, all vision is concentrated in the DNA. And that is why we have these town hall meetings and we do these partnerships, because these are persons who are champions for various causes, and they've done much research, done much work, much advocacy. And so it's good to partner with them to help to inform our policies. And so this has been, in that regard, has been a very, very fruitful exercise. All of this, of course, must be undergirded by a strong social safety net and system. And that is why I say education is key to our platform. I believe strongly in education. Education took me from one social level to the next social level. And I believe that that is the door to many opportunities. Again, you will hear us talking about the expansion of the University of the Bahamas throughout the archipelago. Healthcare is also essential to any strong society, especially in a society like the Bahamas and how we are growing. And Darren mentioned earlier the Rand Hospital, and it's just very unfortunate that in today's Bahamas, that persons within the Bahamas are living in those conditions. You heard our deputies, you heard Vice Chair Smith speak about the fact that when you fly over, you can see still blue tarpaulins on persons' roofs. And it's unacceptable to the extent that persons are still in tents in the Rand Memorial Hospital. Reform of immigration, we get a lot of conversation on that. I saw some questions about it on the stream. The DNA is the only party that has committed to the referendum and to look at Article 7. And again, in line and in wishes with the majority of the Bahamian people. We have also committed to looking at the work permit policy to ensure that there is not an excessive abuse of that policy and that Bahamian laborers are not being disadvantaged. We just celebrated Labor Day, and the DNA is being very aggressive in partnering with the labor movement to ensure that the rights and the economy and the good standard of living is protected for the average Bahamian in the workforce. But in the reform of the immigration system, we're not just looking at the review of that legislation, our constitution, but also using technology to stem the activity of illegal migration, human trafficking, arms trafficking, but also poaching in our waters. Again, if we're going to focus on the development of the marine resources and the blue economy, we're going to have to protect those resources. And finally, good governance is at the heart of any platform for any government coming to office today. We've heard a lot of the back and forth and promises for the implementation of the Freedom of Information Act, the implementation of campaign finance laws. If you go back and revise the DNA's policy from 2017, you will find that we committed to the first 18 months in office to just focus on implementing good laws, good governance laws that will increase transparency and accountability in government. That is very important to us. It is very important to me. And I think if a DNA government is allowed to come to office, it will be very difficult for any political party or any politician to come behind and have an easy ride as it relates to corruption and the ability to be able to take advantage of the system. So in closing, I just want to just reinforce out there to the general public that the DNA is a vehicle of change comprised of agents of change leading a revolution. We continue to say that we are leading a revolution to grant access and inclusion and the empowerment of the Bahamian people. We want to lead a new Bahamas that creates an equal opportunity, one that will foster innovation, creativity, and the digital transformation, which expands the ownership through entrepreneurship and better job opportunities. Somebody on the feed also talked about land ownership. I will encourage you to go back to our policies. We talked about a revising of Crown land and making it available to Bahamians for various purposes, residential purposes, commercial purposes, agricultural purposes, and we still hold fast to that. Food security, fair tax system, increased production and export of our culture is at the center of everything. So I would like to thank all of you for tuning in. This platform is going to be here for you to go back to look at. I'm going to go back to look at it. And again, I want to thank all the DNA officers that presented here today. You did an excellent job. And again, thank you to our guests.
Thank you very much, Madam Leader. You always come up and show us why you have achieved this position of leadership. You are truly inspiring. I want to thank all of our panelists, all of the DNA presenters, and all of those who work behind the scene to make this possible. This was not, this is our first time putting on something like this, and it took a lot of people to make it happen. And we want to thank you for all that you've done. And to all of you who are listening and who are watching, we want to invite you to listen out for our announcements. We're going to be doing more of these Zoom meetings and meetings where you can interact and ask us questions. And also, this gives an opportunity to the many people in the DNA who have contributions and who are experts in different areas. And so you can meet them, and so you can interact with them. And you can find out who are the people who are going to be representing your views in order to run this country for Bahamians. So once again, thank you everyone for joining us. We appreciate you giving us your time. You could have been doing so many other things, but you decided to spend it with us. So thank you once again, and we look forward to you interacting with us and contacting us. Go to our website. We're on all social medias. We're on Facebook. We're on YouTube. We're on Instagram, Twitter. Engage us and spread the word. People always say they can't hear from the DNA, but we are always here. We've never stopped campaigning. We've never stopped, I don't like to call it campaigning, but educating like we did today. So spread the word. The best form of advertising is word of mouth. Let them know the DNA is always here. So thank you once again. And we look forward to you. DNA, we believe that we will be the next government. We will deliver for this country. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.